She was cleaning his office when billionaire Roman made a shocking proposition, one night together, to clear her 40K debt. She refused, but got pregnant anyway. Now his psychotic ex is plotting revenge. The ending will destroy you. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Zariah Cole pushed her cleaning cart down the empty hallway of the 40th floor at Monarch Holdings. It was nearly midnight, and her back ached from hours of scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans. At 25, she'd imagined a different life for herself, maybe finishing her nursing degree, maybe even having her own clinic someday. Instead, here she was, working the night shift while her dreams collected dust. Almost done, she whispered to herself, checking her watch. She still needed to stop by the pharmacy on her way home to pick up her mother's medication. The thought of her mother made her chest tighten. Loretta Cole had been declining steadily since Zariah's father died last year. The heart attack had come without warning, leaving behind nothing but grief and a mountain of medical bills. Now, her mother's diabetes was getting worse, and the insurance barely covered half of what she needed. As Zariah rounded the corner toward the executive offices, she noticed a light still on in the CEO's suite. She hesitated. Usually the big shots were long gone by this hour, leaving their messes for people like her to clean up. She knocked gently on the frosted glass door. When no one answered, she used her master key to enter, assuming whoever had been there had forgotten to turn off the lights. Instead, she found herself face to face with Roman Vega. Everyone knew who Roman Vega was. His face was plastered across business magazines and billboards throughout the city. At 30, he was already a legend, the self-made billionaire who'd built Monarch Holdings from nothing into a global empire. Cold, brilliant, and ruthless were the words people used to describe him. In person, he was even more intimidating than in photographs. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and piercing eyes that seemed to see right through her. He sat behind his massive desk, suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms as he studied something on his computer screen. "I'm sorry," Zariah said quickly, stepping back. "I didn't think anyone was here. I'll come back later." Roman looked up, his expression unreadable. "No need. You can clean." His voice was deep and clipped, as if he was used to giving orders that were immediately obeyed. Zariah nodded and began emptying the trash bin, keeping her eyes down. She could feel him watching her. "You're new," he said suddenly. "I've been here 6 months," Zariah replied, surprised he'd noticed her at all. "Name?" "Zariah. Zariah Cole." Something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe, but that was impossible. Why would Roman Vega know who she was? "Cole," he repeated slowly. "Any relation to James Cole?" Zariah froze. "He was my father. He passed away last year." Roman leaned back in his chair, studying her with renewed interest. "I remember the name from a company report. There was a medical grant. It defaulted. The blood drained from Zariah's face. Her father had co-signed for something. She remembered signing papers too, but there had been so many bills, so many forms after his death. She hadn't realized one of them was connected to Monarch. "I don't know anything about a grant," she said, her voice smaller than she intended. $40,000, Roman said, as if discussing the weather, plus interest. Zariah's knees nearly buckled. "40,000? That's impossible. The paperwork says otherwise." He tapped a few keys on his computer. "Your signature is right here alongside your father's. You co-signed as guarantor." The room seemed to spin. $40,000 might as well be 40 million. With her mother's medical bills, her student loans, and the threat of eviction hanging over their heads, there was no way she could pay such an amount. "There must be some mistake," she whispered. "No mistake." Roman stood up and walked around his desk. He was even taller up close. "The company has been trying to contact you for months. Letters, calls." Zariah thought of the pile of unopened mail at home, of the calls she'd stopped answering because they were always debt collectors. She'd been drowning for so long that she'd stopped looking at what was pulling her under. "I can't pay it," she said, her voice breaking despite her best efforts. "Not all at once. Maybe a payment plan." "The debt has already been sent to collections," Roman cut in. "Company policy." Tears stung Zariah's eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She wouldn't cry in front of this man. "Then I guess they'll have to take me to court because I don't have the money." She turned to leave, her hands shaking as she gripped her cleaning cart. "Wait." Something in his tone made her stop. "There might be another solution." Zariah turned back slowly, wariness creeping up her spine. "What kind of solution?" Roman's eyes traveled over her, taking in her simple uniform, her face free of makeup, her hair pulled back in a practical bun. His gaze wasn't leering, but analytical, as if he was calculating her value. "Have dinner with me tomorrow night," he said. Zariah stared at him in disbelief. "Dinner? I have a proposition for you, one that could solve your debt problem." Warning bells rang in Zariah's head. Men like Roman Vega didn't offer solutions without expecting something in return. "I don't think that's a good idea. It's just dinner," he said smoothly. "At my penthouse, 7 o'clock. I'll text you the address." "You don't have my number." A slight smile touched his lips. "I have everyone's number, Miss Cole." With that, he sat back down and returned his attention to his computer, dismissing her as easily as he'd summoned her. Zariah finished cleaning the office in a daze, her mind racing with possibilities, none of them good. $40,000. Kendra's voice rose in shock. Zariah's best friend since childhood sat across from her at their favorite diner, coffee forgotten between them. "And you're actually considering meeting him?" "I don't have a choice," Zariah said, rubbing her temples. She'd barely slept, and her shift at the hospital cafeteria, her day job, had just ended. "Mom's insulin costs are going up again, and the rent is already 2 weeks late." "But dinner at his place alone, girl, that's not a business meeting. Men like that only want one thing." Zariah knew Kendra was right, but desperation had a way of making bad ideas seem reasonable. "Maybe he just wants to discuss a payment plan face to face." Kendra gave her a look that said she wasn't fooling anyone, least of all herself. "And maybe I'm secretly Beyoncé. Come on, Z, you know what he's after." "Then I'll say no and leave," Zariah said firmly. "But I have to at least hear what he's offering, for Mom's sake." Her phone buzzed with a text, an address, followed by "dress formally, 7 p.m. sharp." Zariah showed the message to Kendra, who shook her head. "Well, if you're determined to go into the lion's den, at least borrow my black dress, and call me the second you leave. Promise?" "Promise," Zariah said, wondering what she was getting herself into. Roman Vega's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of the city's most exclusive high-rise. When the private elevator opened directly into his foyer, Zariah stepped out cautiously, feeling like an imposter in Kendra's borrowed dress and the one pair of heels she owned. The space before her was all sleek lines and cold luxury, glass, steel, and white surfaces that probably cost more than she'd make in a lifetime. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a stunning view of the city lights, making her feel as if she was floating above the world. "Ms. Cole." Roman appeared from an adjoining room, dressed in a tailored black suit that emphasized his powerful build. He looked like he belonged on a magazine cover, perfect, polished, and completely untouchable. "Mr. Vega," she replied, proud that her voice didn't waver. He gestured toward a dining area where a table had been set for 2. "Please." The meal was served by a silent staff member who disappeared as quickly as he'd appeared. Zariah picked at her food, too nervous to eat, while Roman watched her with those intense eyes. "You're not eating," he observed. "I'm not here for the food," Zariah said, setting down her fork. "You said you had a proposition." A hint of approval flickered across his face. "Direct. I appreciate that." He took a sip of wine. "The situation is simple. You owe my company a considerable sum that you cannot pay. I'm offering you a way to clear that debt completely." "How?" "Spend 1 night with me," he said, his voice matter of fact. "The debt disappears. All records of it erased." The words hung in the air between them. Zariah's stomach turned to ice as her worst fears were confirmed. "You're asking me to sleep with you to pay off my debt?" Her voice rose with indignation. That's a business arrangement," Roman finished for her. "Nothing more, nothing less." Zariah stood up so quickly her chair nearly toppled over. "I'm not for sale, Mr. Vega. Everyone has a price, Miss Cole." His eyes never left hers. "What's yours? Your mother's health? Your home? Your future? Because without this arrangement, you stand to lose all 3. The brutal truth of his words hit her like a physical blow. She was drowning, and they both knew it. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You could have anyone." Something complicated passed across Roman's face. "I don't want just anyone. I want someone real, someone who hasn't been bought before." He stood and moved closer to her. "Someone like you." Zariah stepped back, bumping into the table. "I need to think about it." "Of course." He handed her a business card. "Call this number with your answer by tomorrow night. If it's yes, the arrangement happens this weekend. If it's no," he shrugged. "The collection process continues." Zariah took the card with trembling fingers and fled to the elevator, her heart pounding and her mind in chaos. "Absolutely not!" Kendra paced around Zariah's small living room later that night. This is insane. It's practically blackmail. I know, Zariah said, her voice hollow. She'd already cried all her tears on the bus ride home. But what choice do I have? Mom needs her medication. We need this apartment. There are other ways, Kendra insisted. We could start a GoFundMe, or you could ask for more hours at the hospital, or... We've tried all that, Zariah cut in. The GoFundMe raised less than $1,000. I'm already working 2 jobs, and now there's this debt hanging over my head. She covered her face with her hands. One night, Kendra, one night and it all goes away. And what about after? How will you face yourself? How will you keep cleaning his office every night? Zariah hadn't thought that far ahead. The idea of seeing Roman again after it happened made her stomach twist. But then she thought of her mother, asleep in the next room, growing weaker each day. I'll request a different floor, she said quietly. I'll figure it out. I always do. Kendra sat beside her and took her hands. Z, this isn't right. Men like Roman Vega think they can buy anything, and anyone. Don't let him buy you. It's just my body, Zariah whispered, not my soul. But even as she said it, she wasn't sure if that was true. The next evening, Zariah sat by her mother's bedside watching her sleep. Loretta Cole had once been a force of nature, a nurse who'd worked double shifts to support her family, a woman who'd filled their small home with laughter and love. Now she was a shadow, her once strong body ravaged by illness and grief. What would you tell me to do, Mama? Zariah whispered, stroking her mother's thin hand. You always said to hold on to my pride, that it was the one thing no one could take from me. But what good is pride if I lose you? Her mother stirred slightly, but didn't wake. On the nightstand, the pill organizer was nearly empty. They'd have to refill her prescriptions soon, and the insurance would only cover part of the cost. With a heavy heart, Zariah kissed her mother's forehead and went to make the call. Roman answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. Ms. Cole. Yes, she said, the word catching in her throat. My answer is yes. There was a brief silence. Saturday, 8 p.m. I'll send a car. The line went dead before she could respond. Zariah stood in the darkened kitchen, the phone clutched in her hand, wondering if she'd just made a deal with the devil. Saturday arrived with brutal swiftness. Zariah spent the day in a fog, going through the motions at the hospital cafeteria, checking on her mother, cleaning the apartment, anything to keep her mind off what would happen that night. At 7, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman who stared back at her. She'd applied minimal makeup and let her hair down from its usual bun. The simple black dress she wore was the same one she'd borrowed from Kendra before, the only thing in either of their wardrobes that seemed appropriate. It's just one night, she told her reflection. You can do this. Her phone buzzed with a text. Car waiting downstairs. With one last look at her sleeping mother and a quick text to Kendra confirming she was going through with it, Zariah left the apartment and descended to the street, where a sleek black car idled by the curb. The drive to Roman's penthouse passed in a blur. When the elevator doors opened this time, the penthouse was dimly lit, soft music playing in the background. Roman stood by the windows, his back to her, a glass in his hand as he looked out at the city. He turned when he heard her, his eyes taking her in slowly. He'd discarded his usual suit jacket, wearing just a white shirt with the top buttons undone and dark trousers. Even in this more casual state, he radiated power and control. Would you like a drink? He asked, gesturing to a bar cart. Zariah shook her head. I'd rather just get this over with. Something like disappointment flashed across his face, but it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. As you wish. He set his glass down and approached her slowly, as if she might bolt at any sudden movement. When he stood directly in front of her, he raised a hand to her face, his fingers lightly tracing her cheekbone. You're trembling, he observed. Wouldn't you be? She replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. His hand dropped. I'm not going to hurt you, Zariah. It was the first time he'd used her first name, and somehow that made everything worse. This wasn't supposed to be personal. It was a transaction, nothing more. Let's just go to the bedroom, she said, steeling herself. Roman studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. He led her through the penthouse to a massive bedroom dominated by a king-sized bed. The lights were low here too, casting everything in soft shadows. May I? He asked, his hands hovering near the zipper of her dress. Zariah nodded stiffly, turning her back to him. She felt his fingers at her nape, then the slow drag of the zipper down her spine. The dress loosened but didn't fall, and she clutched it to her chest, suddenly unable to go through with it. I can't, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. I thought I could, but I can't. She expected anger, expected him to remind her of their deal and the consequences of breaking it. Instead, Roman stepped back, giving her space. We don't have to do anything you don't want to do, he said quietly. Zariah turned to face him, confused. But the debt will still be taken care of. She blinked at him through her tears. Why? Why would you do that if you don't get what you wanted? Roman's expression softened, revealing a glimpse of something human beneath the cold exterior. Maybe what I want has changed. He reached out slowly and brushed a tear from her cheek. The gentle touch broke something inside her, and suddenly she was crying in earnest, all the stress and fear and shame of the past months pouring out of her. To her shock, Roman pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her as she sobbed. He didn't speak, just held her until the storm passed. When she finally calmed, she became acutely aware of their position. Her face pressed against his shirt, his heartbeat steady under her ear, his hand making soothing circles on her back. It was intimate in a way that sex wouldn't have been, and somehow that was more terrifying. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry. Don't be, he said, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. Stay. Not for that. Just stay. We can talk. Zariah looked up at him, searching his face for signs of deception. All she found was a weariness that matched her own, and something else, something that looked almost like longing. Against her better judgment, she nodded. Okay, I'll stay. Roman smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face entirely. He offered her his hand. Let's go back to the living room. I think we could both use that drink now. As Zariah zipped her dress back up and followed him out of the bedroom, she had the strangest feeling that whatever was happening between them had shifted into something neither of them had anticipated, something that both terrified and intrigued her. One night, she reminded herself, it was still just one night. By morning this would all be over, and she could go back to her life, debt-free and intact. But as Roman handed her a glass and their fingers brushed, sending an unexpected spark through her veins, she wondered if anything would ever really be the same again. They talked for hours. At first, the conversation was stilted, both of them dancing around the elephant in the room. But after their second drink, something loosened in Roman, and he began to ask her questions about her life, her dreams, her family. Real questions, as if he genuinely wanted to know. And Zariah, to her own surprise, found herself answering honestly. She told him about her father's sudden death, about dropping out of nursing school to care for her mother, about working 2 jobs just to stay afloat. She told him about the small dreams she still clung to, finishing her degree someday, maybe opening a community clinic in her neighborhood where people wouldn't have to choose between medicine and food. Why nursing? Roman asked, his eyes intent on her face. I've always wanted to help people, Zariah said simply. To make a difference. Noble, he said, but without mockery. Most people just want to help themselves. Like you? The words slipped out before she could stop them. Instead of taking offense, Roman laughed, a surprisingly warm sound. Touché. Yes, like me. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. But you might be surprised to know it wasn't always that way. What changed you? His expression darkened. Life, experience. Learning that the only person you can truly count on is yourself. Zariah felt a pang of sympathy, recognizing the loneliness behind his words. That's a sad way to live, but a safe one, he countered. Is it really living if you're just trying to stay safe? Roman looked at her with new respect. You're quite something, Zariah Cole. So I've been told, she said with a small smile. As the night wore on, they moved from the couch to the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below them. Roman brought out blankets when the air grew chilly, wrapping one around her shoulders with unexpected tenderness. Tell me about your mother, he said, leaning against the railing beside her. Zariah's face softened. She's the strongest person I know. Raised me by herself after my dad left when I was little. The man who died, he was my stepfather, but he was more of a real father than my biological one ever was. She pulled the blanket tighter. Now she's the one who needs taking care of, and I can't seem to do enough. You're doing more than most would, Roman said quietly. It doesn't feel like enough. Zariah turned to look at him. What about your parents? A shadow crossed his face. My mother left when I was 8. My father, he paused. My father taught me that power is the only protection in this world. That and money. Sounds like a hard lesson for a child. It was a necessary one. They fell into silence, but it was comfortable now, each lost in their own thoughts. When Zariah yawned, Roman checked his watch. "It's late. You should rest." "I should go home," she said, suddenly remembering her mother, Kendra's worried texts, the real world waiting outside this strange bubble they'd created. "Stay," Roman said, and there was something in his voice, not a command, but almost a plea. "The guest room is prepared. You can leave in the morning." Zariah hesitated, knowing she should refuse, but the thought of the long journey home at this hour, of facing the cold reality of her life after this unexpected connection, made her nod. "Okay, just for tonight." Roman showed her to a guest suite larger than her entire apartment. Before leaving her at the door, he took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For seeing me," he replied cryptically. "Good night, Zariah." She watched him walk away, confused by the mixture of relief and disappointment swirling in her chest. This wasn't how she'd expected the night to go. Not at all. As she slipped into the luxurious bed, her last thought before drifting off to sleep was that maybe, just maybe, there was more to Roman Vega than the cold, calculating businessman the world saw. And maybe, despite everything, she wanted to discover what that was. What she couldn't know, was that this night had changed everything. That in a few weeks' time she would discover a consequence neither of them had anticipated. A consequence that would bind them together far more permanently than any business arrangement ever could. Zariah woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, momentarily confused by the luxurious surroundings. The events of the previous night came rushing back. The arrangement, her breakdown, the hours of conversation with Roman that had felt more intimate than any physical encounter could have been. She checked her phone. 6 missed calls from Kendra and a worried text from her neighbor who was checking on her mother. It was already 9 in the morning, later than she'd slept in years. After a quick shower in the guest bathroom that was bigger than her entire bedroom at home, Zariah slipped back into her dress from the night before. She found a note on the nightstand, written in a strong, precise hand. "Zariah, had to leave for a meeting. Help yourself to breakfast. The debt has been cleared. Your family's medical grant has also been extended with no repayment required." Roman below, his signature was a phone number. His personal line, she assumed. Zariah stared at the note, emotions warring inside her. Relief that the debt was gone, confusion about what had happened between them, and something else, something she didn't want to name, at the thought of never seeing him again. "Ridiculous," she muttered to herself as she made her way to the elevator. "The man tried to buy you, remember?" But as the elevator descended to the lobby, she couldn't shake the memory of his face in those quiet moments on the balcony, the vulnerability she'd glimpsed beneath his armor, the loneliness that echoed her own. By the time she reached her apartment, Zariah had convinced herself that it was better this way. The debt was gone. She would never have to see Roman Vega again. She could focus on what mattered: her mother, her work, her future. Life could go back to normal, except it didn't. For the first week after that night, Zariah threw herself into her routine with renewed energy. With the debt cleared, she could breathe a little easier. She even requested a transfer to a different floor at Monarch Holdings, which was granted without question. But Roman Vega wasn't so easily erased. She found herself looking for him in the lobby when she arrived for her night shift. She thought of him during quiet moments, remembering snippets of their conversation, the feel of his arms around her as she cried, the gentle press of his lips against her hand. "You're being stupid," she told her reflection as she got ready for work one evening. "He's not thinking about you. You were just another business transaction to him." The words sounded hollow even to her own ears. 2 weeks after their night together, Zariah received a package at work, a small box wrapped in simple black paper. Inside was a business card for the Dean of Nursing at the city's most prestigious university, along with a note, "They're expecting your call. Tuition taken care of." Zariah's first instinct was to send it back. She didn't want his charity, didn't want to be another project for a rich man to feel good about. But as she held the card, thinking about what it would mean to finish her degree, to finally have the career she'd dreamed of, her pride warred with practicality. In the end, she kept the card but didn't call the number. She wasn't ready to be further in his debt. That night at home, she found her mother more alert than she'd been in weeks, sitting up in bed, looking through old photo albums. "Who was that man who came by today?" Loretta asked when Zariah brought in her evening medication. Zariah froze. "What man? Tall? Handsome? In an expensive suit? Said he was from the hospital." Loretta's eyes were clearer than they'd been in months. "He brought these." She gestured to a bag of medications on her nightstand. all her prescriptions, filled for 3 months. He came here, inside our apartment. Alarm bells rang in Zariah's head. He was a perfect gentleman, Loretta assured her. Said the hospital had a new program for chronic patients. Even left his card. Zariah snatched up the business card beside the medication. Plain white with just a name and number. Roman Vega. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone and dialed the number. He answered on the second ring. Zariah. The sound of her name in his voice sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. You came to my home? You talked to my mother? She needed her medication, he said simply, as if that explained everything. That's not your decision to make. You can't just insert yourself into my life like this. There was a pause. You're right, I apologize. The simple admission deflated her anger somewhat. Just don't do it again, please. I won't come to your home without your permission, he agreed. Then after a beat, did you call the dean? Zariah sighed. No, and I'm not going to. I don't want your charity, Roman. It's not charity. It's an investment. In what? In someone worth investing in, he said quietly. The sincerity in his voice made her throat tighten. I have to go. Zariah, wait. She hung up before he could finish, her heart pounding uncomfortably in her chest. 3 weeks after their night together, Zariah woke up feeling nauseated. She barely made it to the bathroom before emptying her stomach. She blamed it on the Chinese takeout from the night before and dragged herself to her shift at the hospital cafeteria anyway. When the same thing happened 3 days in a row, she began to worry. When she realized she was late, something that had never happened to her regular as clockwork cycle, worry turned to panic. No, she whispered, sitting on the edge of her bathtub, staring at the calendar on her phone. No. But her body didn't care about her denial. The symptoms were all there. The nausea, the fatigue, the tenderness in her breasts. And they'd used protection that night, but they hadn't. Because nothing had happened that night. They'd talked, they'd connected, but they hadn't. Except that wasn't entirely true, was it? There had been that moment, in the early hours of the morning, when she'd woken to find him sitting on the edge of her bed, watching her sleep. She'd been half dreaming, and he'd looked at her with such longing that she'd reached for him. What followed had been hazy, dreamlike, his lips on hers, gentle at first, then hungry. Her pulling him down beside her, both of them lost in a moment of connection neither had expected. They hadn't gone all the way, had they? She remembered him pulling back, saying something about not taking advantage, about wanting it to be real. But they'd been close, so close, close enough for something to happen. Zariah's hands shook as she drove to the pharmacy farthest from her neighborhood, where no one would recognize her. She bought 3 different pregnancy tests and took them all in the store's bathroom. All 3 showed the same result, positive. She drove home in a daze, tears blurring her vision. How could this happen? They'd barely done anything, but barely wasn't nothing. And now there was a life growing inside her, a life that would tie her to Roman Vega forever. For a wild moment, she considered not telling him. She could handle this on her own. She'd been handling everything on her own for years. But as she placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach, she knew that wasn't fair. Not to her, not to the baby, and not even to Roman. He deserved to know. What he chose to do with that information would tell her everything she needed to know about him. With a deep breath, she pulled out her phone and called him. We need to talk, in person. Roman's private office at Monarch Holdings was a far cry from his penthouse. All business, with none of the personal touches that had humanized his home. He stood when she entered, his expression carefully neutral. Zariah, this is unexpected. She'd rehearsed what she would say a dozen times on the drive over, but now that she was face to face with him, all her prepared speeches evaporated. She blurted out the truth instead. I'm pregnant. Roman went very still, his eyes widening slightly, the only sign that her words had affected him at all. You're certain? 3 tests, all positive. He moved from behind his desk slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. And it's yours, she confirmed, her voice breaking slightly. There hasn't been anyone else. Not for a long time. Roman ran a hand through his hair, the first genuinely unguarded gesture she'd ever seen from him. I see. Zariah steeled herself for what would come next. Denial, accusations, maybe an offer of money to take care of the problem. Men like Roman Vega didn't want unplanned children with women who cleaned their offices. What do you want to do? He asked instead, his voice carefully controlled. The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? About the pregnancy. About... He gestured vaguely between them. All of this. Zariah hadn't allowed herself to think that far ahead. She'd been so focused on telling him that she hadn't considered what came after. I don't know, I thought you should know. Roman nodded slowly, his mind clearly racing behind those intense eyes. Thank you for telling me. He walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. I'd like to be involved. Of all the responses she'd imagined, this wasn't one of them. Involved how? He turned back to face her. In every way. This is my child too, Zariah. You barely know me, she pointed out. One night of conversation and whatever happened after doesn't make us... She trailed off, not sure what to call them. No, Roman agreed. But it's a start, and now we have a reason to figure out the rest. Zariah felt lightheaded suddenly, the reality of the situation crashing down on her. She was pregnant with Roman Vega's baby. Roman Vega, CEO of Monarch Holdings. Roman Vega, whose net worth was probably more than the GDP of small countries. Roman Vega, who had initially tried to buy her for a night. I need to sit down, she murmured, sinking into the nearest chair. Roman was beside her in an instant, kneeling to look into her face. Are you all right? Can I get you water? Should I call a doctor? The concern in his voice was so genuine that it brought tears to her eyes. I'm fine, just overwhelmed. He took her hands in his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a soothing gesture. I have a proposal. Zariah laughed shakily. Another one? The last one worked out so well. A flicker of remorse crossed his face. This one is different. Move in with me. What? She pulled her hands away. Move into my penthouse. You and your mother. There's more than enough space. You'd both have your own suite of rooms. The best medical care for her. No more working 2 jobs for you. You could go back to school like you wanted. Zariah stared at him in disbelief. You want me to be your... What? Your live-in baby mama? Roman winced at the term. I want you to be comfortable and cared for while carrying our child. I want to get to know you better. He hesitated. I want a chance to do this right. By keeping me like a pet in your gilded cage. Zariah stood up, anger replacing her shock. I'm not something you can buy and add to your collection, Roman. That's not what I'm suggesting, he said, rising to his feet as well. Isn't it? You tried to buy me once before. Now you're just changing the terms of the arrangement. Roman's jaw tightened. This isn't about buying you, this is about taking responsibility. I don't need you to take responsibility for me. I've been taking care of myself just fine. And now you're pregnant with my child, he countered, his voice rising to match hers. A child who deserves every advantage I can provide, including having both parents under the same roof. Zariah shook her head, backing toward the door. This is too much. I need time to think. Roman visibly reined in his emotions, his face settling back into its usual controlled mask. Of course, take all the time you need. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key card. But if you decide to accept my offer, this will get you into the penthouse any time, day or night. Zariah hesitated, then took the card. I'm not promising anything. I'm not asking for promises, just a chance. Their eyes met, and for a moment Zariah glimpsed that same vulnerability she'd seen the night they'd spent talking, a longing for connection that mirrored her own, despite everything. I'll think about it, she said finally, slipping the keycard into her purse. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. He asked you to move in with him. Kendra's voice rose so high that several other customers in the coffee shop turned to stare. After trying to buy you for a night, and now you're having his baby. Girl, this is like a soap opera. Zariah groaned, burying her face in her hands. Don't remind me. What am I going to do, Ken? Kendra stirred her latte thoughtfully. Well, what do you want to do? I don't know. Zariah threw up her hands in frustration. Part of me wants to run as far away from him as possible. He represents everything I've always hated about the system. Rich people thinking they can buy whatever they want, including people. And the other part? Zariah bit her lip. The other part remembers how he was that night. How he held me when I cried. How he talked about his childhood, his fears. There's a real person under all that money and power, Ken. A person I think I could... She couldn't finish the sentence. Like, Kendra supplied. Maybe even more than like? It's crazy, right? After everything? Kendra reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Life is crazy, Z. And from what you've told me, your mom would get better care living in his fancy penthouse. You could finish your degree. Your baby would have everything it needs. She paused. And maybe, just maybe, you wouldn't have to do it all alone for once. Tears pricked at Zariah's eyes. But what if it's all just another transaction to him? What if he gets bored of playing house with the cleaning lady? Then you leave, Kendra said simply. You've survived worse. But what if it's not? What if there's something real there? Zariah had no answer for that. Loretta Cole looked at her daughter with knowing eyes after Zariah explained the situation. They were sitting in their small living room, the TV muted in the background, a half-finished puzzle on the coffee table between them. "You love him," her mother said. It wasn't a question. Zariah startled. "What? No, I barely know him." Loretta smiled knowingly. "Sometimes you don't need a lot of time to know what's in your heart. This isn't about my heart, Mom. This is about what's best for the baby and for you." "Is it?" Loretta reached across the puzzle to take her daughter's hand. "Zariah, you've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. First me, then your stepfather when he got sick, then me again. You've put your dreams on hold, worked yourself to exhaustion. Maybe it's time to let someone take care of you for a change. But moving in with him? Into his world? I don't belong there. Baby girl, you belong wherever you choose to be." Loretta's eyes were clear and direct. "And if this man is offering you a chance at a better life, for you, for my grandchild, and yes, for me too, then I think you should take it. At least, give it a try." Zariah looked around their small apartment, the home she'd fought so hard to keep, with its second-hand furniture and water stains on the ceiling. She thought about the medical bills piling up, about the second job she'd have to quit once the pregnancy progressed, about the nursing degree she might never finish. Then she thought about Roman's penthouse, with its space and light, about her mother having a comfortable place to recover her strength, about the baby growing inside her having a nursery instead of a corner in her bedroom. "What if it doesn't work out?" she whispered. Loretta squeezed her hand. "Then we come back here and start over. We're good at that, remember?" Zariah nodded slowly, a decision forming in her mind. "I'll call him tomorrow." The next day, Zariah stood in front of Roman's building, her hand clutching the key card he'd given her. She'd called him that morning to accept his offer, and he'd immediately arranged for movers to pack up her apartment. It had all happened so fast that she hadn't had time to second-guess herself. Now, as she stepped into the private elevator that would take her to the penthouse, to her new home, doubts flooded her mind. Was she making a huge mistake? Was she trading her independence for comfort, her freedom for security? The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, and there stood Roman, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. He'd discarded his usual business suit for dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, making him appear younger, more approachable. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I came," Zariah confirmed, stepping cautiously into the foyer. "My mother will be here tomorrow. The doctor wanted to monitor her overnight after adjusting her medication." Roman nodded. "I've prepared the east wing for her. It has the best views of the sunrise." He hesitated. "Would you like to see your rooms?" "My rooms? Plural?" A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I thought you might want a bedroom and an office for your studies." Something warm unfurled in Zariah's chest at the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "Yes, I'd like that." Roman led her through the penthouse, pointing out features along the way. The kitchen where a private chef would prepare their meals, the home gym, the library filled with books. Zariah tried not to gape at the luxury surrounding her, at the casual display of wealth that represented more money than she'd see in a lifetime. Her suite of rooms was on the west side of the penthouse, connected to the main living area, but private enough to feel like her own space. The bedroom was elegant but not ostentatious, decorated in soothing blues and creams. The adjoining office had a desk positioned to take advantage of the city view, with a state-of-the-art computer already set up. "Is it acceptable?" Roman asked, watching her reaction closely. Zariah ran her hand over the soft comforter on the bed. "It's beautiful. Thank you. There's one more thing." He opened a door she hadn't noticed, revealing a small room adjacent to the bedroom. It was empty except for a comfortable chair by the window. "I thought, for the nursery, when the time comes, you can decorate it however you want." The simple gesture, this powerful man creating space in his life for their child, brought unexpected tears to Zariah's eyes. That's really thoughtful." Roman took a step toward her, then seemed to think better of it. "I want you to be comfortable here, Zariah. I want this to work." "Why?" The question had been burning inside her since his offer. "Why go to all this trouble? You could have just set up a trust fund for the baby and gone on with your life." Something vulnerable flickered in Roman's eyes. "Because I know what it's like to grow up with everything except what matters most." "Which is family," he said simply. "Real family, not just people who share your name or your DNA." The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep inside Zariah. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider that perhaps this arrangement could be more than just a practical solution, that perhaps over time it could evolve into something meaningful for both of them. "I'll try," she said softly, "to make this work, for the baby's sake." Roman nodded, a cautious hope in his eyes. "That's all I'm asking for." The first few weeks of their new living arrangement were awkward, to say the least. Zariah felt like an imposter in the luxurious surroundings, constantly afraid of breaking something expensive or saying the wrong thing to the staff. Roman, for his part, seemed unsure how to act around her outside the context of work or their one night of intense conversation. They circled each other cautiously, sharing meals in polite silence, retreating to their separate spaces whenever the tension grew too thick. The only times Zariah felt truly comfortable were when she was with her mother, who had settled into her new surroundings with surprising ease. "This view is better than any TV show," Loretta said one afternoon as they sat in her suite, looking out at the city spread below them. "And that Dr. Roman found Dr. Patel, he's adjusted my medication so well, I actually feel like getting out of bed in the morning." Zariah smiled, genuinely happy to see color returning to her mother's cheeks. "I'm glad, Mom." Loretta gave her a knowing look. "But you're still not sure about all this, are you?" Zariah sighed. "It's just strange, living here, with him. We barely know each other, and yet we're having a baby together. So get to know him," Loretta said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "You're under the same roof. Talk to the man." "We do talk, about practical things, the baby, the household. That's not talking, that's organizing." Loretta shook her head. "When's the last time you asked him about his day, or told him about yours? When's the last time you shared a meal without that expensive dining table between you?" Zariah had no answer for that. That evening she found Roman in the kitchen, surprisingly alone. The chef had prepared dinner and left it warming in the oven, but Roman was standing at the counter making a sandwich. "Not hungry for the salmon?" she asked, nodding toward the oven. Roman looked up, seeming almost embarrassed to be caught. "Sometimes I just want simple food, the kind I used to make for myself before all this." He gestured vaguely at their surroundings. Zariah was intrigued by this glimpse of his past. What was it like before all this? Roman hesitated, then continued assembling his sandwich, plain turkey and cheese on wheat bread. Small apartment in a bad neighborhood, scholarship to college, working nights to make ends meet. He glanced at her. "It's not so different from your life, actually." The revelation surprised her. "I always assumed you came from money." "Most people do." He cut the sandwich in half and offered her one piece. "Hungry?" The simple gesture of sharing his makeshift meal touched her more than any of the elaborate dinners they'd had at the formal dining table. She took the half sandwich and hopped up to sit on the counter beside him. "So how did you go from small apartment to all this?" she asked, taking a bite. Something in Roman's posture relaxed as he leaned against the counter next to her. "Hard work, some luck, a lot of determination." He took a bite of his own sandwich. "And learning to be ruthless when necessary. Like with me?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. Roman's eyes met hers, serious and direct. "That was a mistake. The worst one I've made in a long time." "Why did you do it?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I saw you cleaning my office that night, and something about you." He shook his head. "You seemed so different from everyone else in my world, so real. I wanted to know you, but I didn't know how to just ask like a normal person. So you tried to buy me instead." Zariah's tone was challenging but not angry. "I told you it was a mistake." Roman ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of genuine emotion. "In my world, everything has a price. Everyone has an angle. I forgot there are people who don't operate that way. People like me, people like you," he agreed. "And I'm trying to remember how to be that kind of person too." The vulnerability in his admission created a shift between them, subtle but significant. For the first time since moving in, Zariah felt like they were having a real conversation, seeing each other as people rather than as players in some strange arrangement. "So," she said, deliberately lightening the mood, "turkey sandwiches are your comfort food. What else don't I know about the great Roman Vega?" A genuine smile spread across his face, the kind that reached his eyes and transformed his features. "That's a long list. We might need more sandwiches." Zariah smiled back, something warm and hopeful blooming in her chest. "I've got time." They ended up sitting on the kitchen floor, backs against the cabinets, sharing stories until well past midnight. Roman told her about growing up poor with a mother who left and a father who saw emotions as weakness. Zariah told him about dropping out of school to care for her stepfather, about dreams deferred but never abandoned. It wasn't love, It wasn't even close, but it was a beginning, a tiny bridge across the vast gulf that separated their worlds. And as Zariah finally made her way to her room that night, she found herself looking forward to building more of those bridges, one conversation at a time. What she didn't know was that outside their carefully constructed bubble, forces were gathering that threatened to tear down everything they were beginning to build. That even as they took these first tentative steps toward each other, someone from Roman's past was watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Someone who wouldn't rest until she destroyed whatever was growing between Roman Vega and the woman carrying his child. As spring turned to summer, the penthouse that had once felt like a gilded cage to Zariah slowly began to feel like home. Morning sickness gave way to a healthy appetite and a small, firm bump that reminded her daily of the life growing inside her. At 16 weeks pregnant, Zariah found herself settling into a routine that would have been unimaginable just months before. Her mother was thriving under Dr. Patel's care, often joining Zariah for breakfast on the terrace or spending afternoons in the building's garden with other residents. Zariah herself had enrolled in online nursing courses, determined to finish her degree before the baby arrived. And then there was Roman. Since their late-night conversation in the kitchen, something had shifted between them. They still maintained separate bedrooms, still navigated their unusual situation with caution, but the walls were coming down brick by brick. They shared meals without awkwardness now, sought each other out for conversation instead of avoiding it. One evening, Zariah found Roman in his home office, surrounded by papers and looking unusually stressed. She knocked gently on the open door, a cup of tea in her hand. "Thought you might need this," she said, setting the cup on his desk. "You missed dinner." Roman looked up, his expression softening at the sight of her. "I'm sorry, this merger is proving complicated." Zariah perched on the edge of his desk, something she would never have dared do weeks earlier. "Anything I can help with?" He smiled tiredly. "Unless you've secretly got an MBA I don't know about." "No MBA," she admitted with a smile, "but I've been told I'm a good listener." Roman hesitated, then pushed the papers aside. "It's Victoria Chambers. Your competitor, the one who owns Apex Industries?" He nodded, looking impressed that she'd remembered. "She's blocking the merger at every turn, making unreasonable demands, threatening to pull out." "Why? What does she gain from stopping it?" "It's not about business," Roman admitted, rubbing his temples. "It's personal." Zariah raised an eyebrow. "How personal?" "We were engaged 3 years ago." The revelation hit Zariah with unexpected force. Of course Roman had a past. A man like him would have had relationships before, serious ones. But the thought of him engaged to someone else, perhaps in love with someone else, created a strange, hollow feeling in her chest. "What happened?" she asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. Roman's expression darkened. "I ended it when I discovered she was only interested in merging our companies and our fortunes. She'd been feeding information to her father's company the entire time we were together." "That's awful." "That's business," he said with a shrug that didn't quite hide the hurt beneath. "Or at least that's what I thought love was. A transaction, a merger of assets." Zariah placed her hand over his on the desk, a small gesture of comfort that felt significant. "And now?" Roman looked up at her, something vulnerable in his gaze. "Now I'm not so sure." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken feelings. Zariah became acutely aware of how close they were sitting, of the warmth of his hand beneath hers, of the way his eyes dropped briefly to her lips before meeting her gaze again. The moment was broken by her phone buzzing with a text from her mother. Zariah pulled back, her heart racing as she checked the message. "Mom needs help with something," she said, standing quickly. "I should go." Roman nodded, disappointment flashing across his face. "Thank you for the tea and for listening." Zariah paused at the door, looking back at him. "That's what friends do, right?" "Is that what we are?" Roman asked quietly. "Friends." She didn't have an answer for that. Whatever was growing between them defied simple labels. It wasn't just friendship, but it wasn't quite romance either. It existed in the in-between spaces, in shared meals and late-night conversations, in the flutter of her heart when he smiled at her, in the gentle way he sometimes placed his hand on her growing belly. "Good night, Roman," she said softly, leaving the question unanswered. The next morning, Zariah had just finished breakfast with her mother when Roman appeared, dressed in his usual impeccable suit, but looking uncharacteristically excited. "I have something to show you," he said, holding out his hand to her. "Both of you." Loretta gave her daughter a knowing smile. "Don't mind me. I've got my book club in an hour anyway. Zariah followed Roman to the elevator, curious. Where are we going? You'll see. They rode to the 38th floor, 2 floors below the penthouse. When the doors opened, Roman led her down a hallway to a door marked 3801. He produced a key and unlocked it, gesturing for her to enter first. Zariah stepped into a spacious apartment that was clearly in the midst of renovation. Drop cloths covered the floors, and the walls were freshly painted in soft, welcoming colors. But what caught her eye was the room directly ahead, a nursery partially furnished with a beautiful wooden crib, a rocking chair, and a changing table. The walls were painted a gentle green, with a mural of a forest scene on one wall. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought—" Roman hesitated, suddenly looking uncertain. "I thought you might want your own space, for you and the baby, and your mother, of course. This apartment connects to the penthouse through a private stairwell, but it would be yours, your own home." Zariah walked slowly into the nursery, running her hand over the smooth wood of the crib. "You did this? For us?" Roman followed her, hands in his pockets. "The nursery was my idea, but a designer helped with the rest. We can change anything you don't like." She turned to face him, eyes shining with unshed tears. "Why?" "Because I want you to stay," he said simply, "after the baby comes. But I don't want you to feel trapped or dependent. I want you to have choices, Zariah. Real ones." The thoughtfulness of the gesture overwhelmed her. This wasn't about control or keeping her under his roof. This was Roman trying to give her exactly what she valued most: independence alongside the security their child needed. "It's perfect," she whispered, emotion tightening her throat. Roman's face lit up with a genuine smile, the kind that transformed his usually serious features. "Really? Really?" Before she could overthink it, Zariah stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him in a hug. Roman went still for a moment, as if unused to such physical affection. Then his arms came around her, holding her close but gently, mindful of her pregnancy. His chin rested atop her head, and Zariah could hear the steady beat of his heart against her ear. It felt right. It felt like home in a way that had nothing to do with the luxurious surroundings. When they finally pulled apart, Roman's hand lingered on her cheek, his eyes searching hers. "Zariah, His phone rang, the sharp sound breaking the moment. With a frustrated sigh, he checked the screen. "I have to take this. It's about the merger." Zariah nodded, stepping back. "Go. We can talk later." As Roman walked away to take the call, Zariah remained in the nursery, one hand on her belly, the other on the crib. For the first time since learning of her pregnancy, she allowed herself to imagine a future that included Roman, not just as the father of her child, but as something more, something that made her heart race and her cheeks flush, something that felt dangerously like falling in love. Victoria Chambers was not a woman accustomed to losing. At 34, she had inherited her father's business acumen and her mother's stunning looks, a combination that had opened doors throughout her life. She'd been groomed from childhood to take over Apex Industries, and her engagement to Roman Vega had been meant to cement her family's position in the business world. His betrayal, for that's how she saw his discovery of her corporate espionage, had been a minor setback. Men were replaceable, business opportunities were not, or so she'd thought until the rumors began circulating about Roman's new living arrangement, about the pregnant woman who had moved into his penthouse, about the way the notoriously cold CEO now left meetings early to attend doctor's appointments and was occasionally spotted in the park on weekends, walking hand in hand with a woman who was decidedly not from their social circle. "Are you sure about this?" Victoria asked her assistant, who had just delivered the latest report on Roman's activities. "Positive," Jeremy replied, handing her a folder. "Her name is Zariah Cole, 25, works as a cleaner at Monarch, or did until she moved in with him. Mother is living with them too. According to my source in the building, Roman is renovating the apartment below his penthouse for them." Victoria flipped through the photos in the folder, surveillance shots of a pretty young black woman with a visible baby bump, sometimes alone, sometimes with Roman. In one photo, they were sitting on a park bench, Roman's hand resting protectively on her belly, both of them smiling. She slammed the folder shut, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the leather. "Find out everything about her, and I mean everything. Everyone has secrets, everyone has a price." "Already on it," Jeremy assured her. "But there's something else you should know, about how they met." Victoria raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "I'm listening." By the time Jeremy finished sharing what he'd learned from a disgruntled former employee at Monarch, Victoria was smiling, a cold, calculating smile that had nothing to do with happiness and everything to do with opportunity. "So our righteous Roman tried to buy himself a night with the cleaning lady," she mused, tapping her nails against her desk. "How wonderfully hypocritical of him." "What are you going to do?" Jeremy asked. Victoria's smile widened. "I'm going to congratulate him, of course. It's the proper thing to do when a colleague is expecting a child, isn't it?" The invitation to the charity gala arrived at the penthouse on a Tuesday morning, an elegant cream-colored envelope addressed to Roman, Vega, and guest. Inside was a gilt-edged card requesting their presence at the annual Children's Hospital benefit, hosted by none other than Apex Industries. "It's a trap," Roman said flatly when Zariah asked him about it over dinner. "Victoria knows about us, and she's planning something." "Then don't go," Zariah suggested, helping herself to more salad. At 5 months pregnant, her appetite had increased significantly. "I have to go. Monarch always sponsors a table. Not showing up would be noticed." He pushed his food around his plate, distracted. "But you should stay home." Zariah put down her fork, her expression hardening. "Why?" "Because you're ashamed to be seen with me." Roman looked up, surprised. "What? No, of course not." "Then what? You think I can't handle your ex-fiancé, or that I'll embarrass you in front of your fancy friends?" "I'm trying to protect you," Roman insisted. "Victoria is dangerous when she feels threatened, and you think I'm not strong enough to handle it." Zariah stood up, tossing her napkin onto the table. "I've been handling difficult situations my entire life, Roman, long before you came along with your money and your protection." Roman rose as well, frustration evident in his stance. "This isn't about your strength. This is about Victoria and what she might do." "What could she possibly do to me?" Zariah challenged. Roman ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as a sign of genuine distress. "She could... There are things about how we met, about the arrangement I proposed. Things that would hurt you if they became public." Understanding dawned on Zariah's face. "You think she knows? About the debt? About what you asked of me that night?" "I think she might," Roman admitted. "And I think she'd use it against us in a heartbeat." Zariah was quiet for a long moment, processing this. "So what? You're going to hide me away forever? Pretend I don't exist outside these walls? What happens when the baby comes, Roman? Will you hide us both then too?" "Of course not," he said, moving toward her. "But this gala, with Victoria there, deliberately trying to provoke us, it's not the right time." "Then when is the right time?" Zariah asked, her voice softer now but no less determined. "There will always be something, Roman, some reason to keep me in the shadows, some part of your world where I don't quite fit." "That's not true," he insisted, reaching for her hands. "I'm not ashamed of you, Zariah. Not of you, not of our child, not of what's growing between us." The simple admission, acknowledging that there was something between them beyond their arrangement, made Zariah's heart skip. But she couldn't let it distract her from the issue at hand. "Prove it," she said. "Take me to the gala. Let Victoria and everyone else see that I'm not just some secret you're keeping, that we're in this together." Roman looked torn, genuine fear for her in his eyes. "And if she tries to hurt you? To humiliate you?" Zariah squeezed his hands. "Then we'll face it together. That's what partners do." "Partners," he repeated, something warm and hopeful blooming in his eyes. "Is that what we are?" Zariah smiled, echoing his question from weeks before. "What would you call it?" Instead of answering with words, Roman leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. When she didn't, he pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle but filled with unspoken emotion. Zariah's arms wound around his neck as she returned the kiss, months of growing feelings finally finding expression. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing a little faster, eyes locked in shared wonder at the line they had just crossed. "I'd call it a beginning," Roman said softly, his forehead resting against hers. "If you want it to be." "I do," Zariah whispered. "But I'm still going to that gala with you." Roman laughed, a genuine sound of both amusement and surrender. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "You need someone stubborn," she replied, her hand resting on his cheek. "Someone who won't let you hide behind those walls you've built." His expression sobered. "I've spent a lifetime building those walls, Zariah. Breaking them down won't be easy." "Good thing I'm not afraid of hard work," she said, rising on tiptoes to kiss him again. Later that night, as they lay together on the couch watching a movie, Zariah's head on Roman's shoulder and his hand gently stroking her hair, She allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this unexpected journey was leading somewhere beautiful. That the arrangement that had begun with such painful shame might transform into something genuine and lasting. She couldn't have known that in an office across town, Victoria Chambers was putting the final touches on a plan designed to destroy that very possibility. A plan that would test not just their fledgling relationship, but the very foundation of trust they were beginning to build. The night of the gala arrived clear and warm. Zariah stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, smoothing down the front of her dress, a floor-length emerald gown that had been specially designed to flatter her 5-month baby bump rather than hide it. Her hair was styled in elegant curls that framed her face, and she wore the simple diamond earrings that had been her mother's gift for her 21st birthday. "You look beautiful," Loretta said from the doorway, pride shining in her eyes. "Like a princess." Zariah turned, smiling self-consciously. "I feel more like an imposter. All these designer clothes, this fancy lifestyle. Sometimes I still feel like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life." "Not someone else's life," her mother corrected gently. "Your life, the one you're building with Roman." The mention of his name brought a flush to Zariah's cheeks. Since their first kiss a week ago, things had been shifting between them. Slowly, cautiously, but undeniably. They still maintained separate bedrooms, both agreeing to take things one step at a time, but there were more touches now, more kisses, more moments of quiet intimacy. "I'm scared, Mom," Zariah admitted, in a rare moment of vulnerability. "Not just about tonight, but about all of it. What if I'm setting myself up for heartbreak?" Loretta crossed the room and took her daughter's hands. "Love is always a risk, baby girl. But from what I've seen, that man looks at you like you hung the moon and stars. Whatever happens tonight, remember that." Before Zariah could respond, there was a knock at the door. Roman stood there, resplendent in a black tuxedo, holding a small velvet box. "May I come in?" he asked, his eyes taking in Zariah with undisguised admiration. Loretta winked at her daughter. "I'll leave you two alone. Have a wonderful evening." When she had gone, Roman crossed the room to Zariah, taking both her hands in his. "You're breathtaking," he said simply. Zariah smiled, feeling some of her nervousness fade under his appreciative gaze. "You clean up pretty well yourself, Mr. Vega." "I brought you something," he said, offering her the velvet box. "A loan, not a gift, if that makes it easier to accept." Curious, Zariah opened the box to find a stunning emerald necklace nestled inside, a teardrop stone surrounded by diamonds that would perfectly complement her dress. "Roman, this is too much," she protested weakly. "Nothing is too much for you," he said, his voice low and sincere. "But if it makes you uncomfortable, you don't have to wear it." Zariah hesitated, then lifted the necklace from the box. "Help me put it on." Roman took the necklace and moved behind her. Zariah lifted her hair as he fastened the clasp, his fingers brushing the nape of her neck in a touch that sent shivers down her spine. When the necklace was secure, he pressed a gentle kiss to her shoulder. "Perfect," he murmured. Zariah turned to face him, her hand going to the pendant that rested just above the swell of her breasts. "Thank you for this, and for not arguing anymore about me coming tonight." Roman's expression grew serious. "I still have concerns. Victoria can be ruthless. So can I when necessary," Zariah reminded him. "I grew up in a neighborhood where you learn to stand your ground or get run over. I may not have her money or her connections, but I know how to handle myself." Pride and worry warred in Roman's eyes. "Just stay close to me tonight, all right? Whatever happens, we face it together." "Together," Zariah agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. The Children's Hospital benefit was held at the city's most exclusive hotel, its grand ballroom transformed into a glittering wonderland of lights and flowers. As Roman and Zariah made their entrance, she was acutely aware of the eyes that turned in their direction, of the whispers that followed their progress across the room. "Ignore them," Roman murmured, his hand firm at the small of her back. "They'll find something else to gossip about in 5 minutes." Zariah forced a smile, channeling every ounce of confidence she possessed. "I'm fine, really." They made their way to the Monarch Holdings table, where several of Roman's executives and their spouses were already seated. Zariah noted the surprise on their faces. Clearly, Roman had not warned them he would be bringing her tonight. "Everyone, this is Zariah Cole," Roman said, his voice carrying a note of challenge that dared anyone to question her presence. "Zariah, you know James and Maria from the office Christmas party. And this is David, our CFO, and his wife, Susan." Zariah shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, and tried to ignore the way Susan's eyes kept dropping to her baby bump. She was relieved when Roman suggested they get drinks before dinner. As they made their way to the bar, a striking blonde woman in a red gown approached, her smile as sharp as a blade. Zariah felt Roman tense beside her and knew instantly who this must be. "Roman, darling," the woman purred, air-kissing his cheek. "So good of you to come, and this must be your guest." "Victoria," Roman acknowledged stiffly. "Allow me to introduce Zariah Cole. Zariah, this is Victoria Chambers, CEO of Apex Industries." Victoria's eyes swept over Zariah with cold assessment, lingering on her pregnant belly. "How lovely to meet you. Roman hasn't shared much about you with our social circle. Something of a whirlwind romance, I understand." The implied judgment was clear, but Zariah smiled pleasantly. "Life's full of surprises." "Indeed it is," Victoria agreed, her gaze dropping to the emerald necklace. "That's a beautiful piece. Family heirloom." Before Zariah could respond, Roman cut in. "It was my grandmother's. Shall we find our seats? I believe dinner is about to be served." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly at the lie. "Of course. We'll catch up properly later. I'm so looking forward to getting to know the woman who's captured Roman's heart after all this time." As she walked away, Zariah released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "So that's your ex?" "That's Victoria," Roman confirmed, his jaw tight. "And she's up to something, I know that look." What could she possibly do at a charity event with hundreds of witnesses? Roman's expression was grim. With Victoria, it's never about direct confrontation. It's about manipulation, about finding your weak spots and exploiting them when you least expect it. Dinner passed without incident, though Zariah was conscious of Victoria watching them from the head table throughout the meal. When the dancing began after the charity auction, Roman led her onto the floor, holding her close as they swayed to the music. "You're doing wonderfully," he murmured into her ear. "Everyone is charmed by you, even David, and he doesn't like anyone." Zariah laughed, relaxing into his arms. "I think his wife is still trying to figure out if I'm your midlife crisis or your gold-digging conquest." "Let them wonder," Roman said, pulling back to look into her eyes. "All that matters is what we know." "And what do we know?" Zariah asked softly. Roman's gaze was intense, vulnerable in a way she'd rarely seen. "That this, us, is the most real thing I've ever felt. That you've changed everything, Zariah. Everything." The raw honesty in his voice made her heart swell. Before she could respond, a tap on Roman's shoulder interrupted them. "May I cut in?" Victoria asked sweetly. "Just for a moment. Girl talk." Roman looked ready to refuse, but Zariah squeezed his hand reassuringly. "It's fine. Why don't you get us some champagne? Sparkling water for me, of course." After a moment's hesitation, Roman nodded and left them, though he didn't go far, positioning himself at the edge of the dance floor where he could keep an eye on them. Victoria's smile dropped the instant he was out of earshot. "Let's not waste time with pleasantries. What's your price?" Zariah blinked in confusion. "Excuse me?" "Your price," Victoria repeated impatiently. "To walk away from Roman. Name it. I'm prepared to be generous." Anger flared in Zariah's chest. "I'm not for sale, Miss Chambers." "Everyone has a price," Victoria said dismissively. "Especially women from your background. $1 million? 2? Think of what that could do for your mother's medical care, for your child's future." Zariah stepped back, breaking contact with the other woman. "You don't know anything about me or my background, and you clearly don't know Roman if you think I'd leave him for money." Victoria laughed, a cold, cutting sound. "Oh, I know Roman better than you think. I know exactly how your little arrangement began, for instance." Ice formed in Zariah's veins. "What are you talking about?" "A debt conveniently forgiven in exchange for one night," Victoria said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. How terribly exploitative of him. Imagine if the board knew their CEO was propositioning the cleaning staff. Imagine if the press found out. Shame and anger warred within Zariah. "That's not what happened." "No?" Victoria raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "So he didn't offer to erase your debt in exchange for sleeping with him? He didn't move you into his penthouse after discovering you were pregnant with his child? Tell me, Zariah, at what point did this business arrangement transform into this touching love story you're trying to sell?" Each word hit like a physical blow, forcing Zariah to confront the ugliness of their beginning, the very thing she'd been trying to forget as feelings grew between them. "You don't know anything about our relationship," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Victoria sensed the weakness and pressed her advantage. "I know that Roman Vega sees people as assets or liabilities. I know that he's playing the devoted father-to-be now, But once the novelty wears off, once you've served your purpose, he'll discard you just as he discarded me. You're wrong about him, Zariah insisted. Am I? Victoria's smile was pitying now. Ask yourself this. What happens after the baby is born? After you've fulfilled the role he's assigned you? Do you really think a man like Roman is going to build a life with his cleaning lady? Before Zariah could respond, Victoria reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is a copy of the confidentiality agreement Roman had drawn up before your first encounter, the one where he planned to buy you for the night. My source at Monarch was kind enough to provide it. Zariah took the paper with trembling hands, unfolding it to see the legal language that would have bound her to silence about their arrangement. At the bottom was a signature line, blank, since she had never signed it, and beside it, Roman's bold signature. He had this prepared before he even approached you, Victoria said, her voice almost gentle now. This wasn't some impulsive offer, Zariah. It was calculated, planned, just business as far as he was concerned. Zariah felt sick, the room suddenly spinning around her. The document in her hands seemed to confirm her worst fears, that despite everything that had happened since, despite the feelings that had grown between them, she had been nothing but a transaction to Roman from the beginning. I'll leave you to think about my offer, Victoria said, pressing a business card into Zariah's hand. Call me when you're ready to discuss terms. And Zariah, I'd consider carefully who you want raising your child, a man who sees people as commodities, or someone with your obvious capacity for love and loyalty. With that parting shot, Victoria glided away, leaving Zariah standing alone in the middle of the dance floor, the confidentiality agreement clutched in her hand and doubts flooding her mind. Roman appeared at her side a moment later, concern etched on his face. What did she say to you? What's that paper? Zariah looked up at him, searching his face for the truth. Did you have a confidentiality agreement drawn up before you proposed our arrangement? The color drained from Roman's face. Zariah, I can explain. So it's true, she whispered, taking a step back from him. You had it all planned out. The debt, the proposition, the silence afterward. It wasn't like that, Roman insisted, reaching for her. Yes, I had the agreement prepared, but that was before I knew you, before that night when everything changed. Did it change, Roman? Or did you just find a different way to get what you wanted? Tears burned behind Zariah's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of all these people. Victoria offered to buy me off, to pay me to leave you. Because in your world, that's how things work, isn't it? People are just assets to be acquired or liabilities to be managed. Victoria is trying to manipulate you, Roman said urgently. To drive a wedge between us. Don't let her. The agreement has your signature on it. Zariah cut in, her voice breaking. You were ready to sign away my dignity, my silence, like it was just another business deal. Roman's face was anguished. I was a different person then. You changed me, Zariah. You made me see that there's more to life than contracts and acquisitions. Please, let's go home and talk about this. Not here. Not like this. The pleading in his voice nearly broke her resolve, but Victoria's words echoed in her mind. Do you really think a man like Roman is going to build a life with his cleaning lady? I need some air, she said, turning away from him. I'll come with you. No, she held up a hand to stop him. I need to be alone right now. Please, Roman. He looked like he wanted to argue, but after a moment he nodded. Take Henderson with you. He's by the door, just for safety. Zariah didn't argue about the security guard. She simply walked away, feeling Roman's eyes on her back as she left the ballroom. In the quiet of the hotel garden, she sank onto a bench, finally allowing the tears to fall. She loved him. Somehow, against all odds and her better judgment, she had fallen in love with Roman Vega, but now she had to face the possibility that their entire relationship was built on a foundation of inequality and manipulation, that what felt real to her was just another arrangement to him. As she sat there, one hand on her belly where their child grew, Zariah faced the hardest question of all. Could she build a life with someone whose very nature was to see the world in terms of transactions? Or was she setting herself up for a lifetime of wondering when she'd outlived her usefulness? Back in the ballroom, Roman watched the garden entrance, fighting the urge to follow her. Victoria appeared at his side, satisfaction evident in her smile. She's quite pretty in an unconventional way, she observed, though perhaps a bit out of her depth in our world. Roman turned to her, his expression cold with fury. What did you do? Victoria shrugged delicately. I simply shared some information she deserved to know, about the true nature of your arrangement. Stay away from her, Roman warned, his voice low and dangerous. Whatever game you're playing, Victoria, it ends now. Oh, I think it's just beginning, Victoria replied, unperturbed by his anger. The question is, Roman, how much are you willing to lose to keep playing? Your reputation, your company? Because make no mistake, if you pursue this absurd domestic fantasy with your little cleaning lady, I will make sure everyone knows exactly how it began. Roman stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Threaten me all you want. I've survived worse. But if you come after Zariah or our child again, you'll discover exactly how ruthless I can be when protecting what matters to me. Victoria's eyes widened slightly at the intensity in his gaze. My, you actually care about her. She sounded genuinely surprised. How interesting and how very useful to know. With a final, satisfied smile, she walked away, leaving Roman to grapple with the realization that in his attempt to protect Zariah by bringing her tonight, he might have lost her instead. Outside in the garden, Zariah wiped her tears and stood up. Decision made. She couldn't continue like this, trapped between doubt and hope, wondering if what they were building was real or just another transaction to Roman. She needed proof, not of his wealth or his protection, but of his heart. She needed to know that she was more than a responsibility to him, more than an obligation created by an unexpected pregnancy and an arrangement gone awry, and the only way to know for sure was to walk away, to force him to choose, not out of duty or guilt, but out of love. With a heavy heart, she signaled to Henderson that she was ready to leave, but instead of returning to the penthouse, she gave him a different address, Kendra's apartment. She would stay there tonight, she decided. And tomorrow, she would face the hardest conversation of her life. She just hoped she was strong enough to walk away if Roman couldn't give her what she needed most, the truth of his heart, laid bare for the first time in his life. Kendra's tiny one-bedroom apartment wasn't designed for 3 adults, but she didn't hesitate when Zariah showed up at her door in an evening gown, tears streaming down her face. I'll take the couch, she said immediately, helping Zariah out of the borrowed emerald dress. You can have the bed. I can't stay long, Zariah insisted, changing into a pair of Kendra's sweatpants and a t-shirt that stretched tight across her baby bump. Just tonight, until I figure out what to do. You can stay as long as you need, Kendra assured her, bringing a mug of chamomile tea to where Zariah sat huddled on the couch. Now tell me everything. Zariah did, the words pouring out of her. The gala, Victoria's revelations, the confidentiality agreement with Roman's signature. By the time she finished, fresh tears were coursing down her cheeks. I was so stupid, Ken. I let myself believe he was different, that what we had was real. It still might be, Kendra said gently. People change, Z. Maybe he really has grown to care for you. Or maybe he's just protecting his investment, Zariah countered bitterly, making sure the mother of his child stays happy so he doesn't lose access to the baby. Her phone buzzed for what seemed like the 100th time since she'd left the gala. Roman again. She ignored it, just as she had all the others. You're going to have to talk to him eventually, Kendra pointed out. I know, Zariah sighed, rubbing her belly where the baby had started kicking restlessly. Just not tonight. Tonight I need to think. But sleep proved elusive. As she tossed in Kendra's bed, the baby kicking as if sensing her distress, Zariah replayed every moment with Roman in her mind. The night they'd spent talking, instead of following through with their arrangement. The way he'd held her when she cried, his face when she told him about the pregnancy, the care he'd taken in preparing a space for her mother, the apartment he'd renovated so she could have independence while still being close. Were those the actions of a man who saw her as just a transaction? Or had something genuine grown between them, despite their ugly beginning? Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from her mother. He's here, looking for you. He's worried sick. Should I tell him where you are? Zariah texted back quickly. No, tell him I'm safe and need time to think. I'll call tomorrow. A moment later, her phone rang, Roman's number flashing on the screen. After a brief internal struggle, she answered. Zariah. His voice was ragged with relief. Are you all right? The baby. We're fine, she cut in, her tone deliberately cool despite the way her heart ached at the concern in his voice. I just need some space tonight. Victoria was lying, Roman said urgently. Whatever she told you. Was the confidentiality agreement a lie? Zariah interrupted. The one with your signature already on it? There was a painful pause. No, he admitted finally. But Zariah, that was before. I don't want to do this over the phone, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. I'll come by tomorrow to get some of my things. We can talk then. Your things? Alarm sharpened his tone. Zariah, don't do this. Please, come home so we can work this out. The plaintive note in his voice nearly broke her resolve. I need time, Roman, to figure out if what we're building is real or just another arrangement. It's real, he insisted. What I feel for you, what do you feel for me? She challenged. Because in all these months, for all the ways things have changed between us, you've never actually said it. There was silence on the other end of the line. That's what I thought, Zariah said softly. Good night, Roman. She hung up before he could respond, before he could hear the sob that broke free from her chest. Curling onto her side, one hand protectively cradling her belly, she finally gave in to the tears she'd been fighting all night. Roman stood in the middle of his penthouse, phone still in his hand, feeling more lost than he had in his entire life. The place that had begun to feel like a home now seemed cold and empty without Zariah's presence. Loretta watched him from the doorway, her expression a mixture of sympathy and assessment. She needs proof, she said simply. Roman turned to her, desperation evident in his usually controlled features. I've given her everything, security, comfort, a future for our child. Things, Loretta interrupted gently. You've given her things, but that's not what she needs from you. Then what? He asked, genuinely bewildered. Tell me what she needs and I'll give it to her. Anything. Loretta shook her head. It's not something you can buy or arrange, Roman. It's something you have to feel. And then you have to be brave enough to say it. With that cryptic statement, she retreated to her suite, leaving Roman alone with thoughts that kept circling back to Victoria's smug face at the gala and the look of betrayal in Zariah's eyes when she'd seen that damned confidentiality agreement. He'd had it drawn up, yes, before he'd known her, when she was just a name on a debt ledger, a potential conquest, before she'd refused him and cried in his arms, before she'd seen past his walls to the lonely child within, before she'd made him feel, truly feel for the first time in years. How could he make her understand that he wasn't that man anymore, that she had changed him, awakened something in him he'd thought long dead? Roman paced the penthouse until dawn, making calls, issuing orders, planning his next move with the strategic precision that had made him a business titan. By morning, he had a plan. It wasn't perfect, and it might not work, but it was all he had. He just hoped it would be enough. Zariah arrived at the penthouse at 10 the next morning, steeling herself for the confrontation ahead. She'd barely slept, her mind and heart at war throughout the night. Part of her wanted to believe in what they'd been building. Another part feared she was being naive, seeing what she wanted to see rather than the truth. The elevator opened directly into the foyer, but instead of Roman waiting for her as she'd expected, the penthouse appeared empty. "Roman!" she called, setting down her purse. "Mama?" When no one answered, Zariah made her way to her mother's suite, thinking perhaps Loretta was resting. But her room was empty too, the bed neatly made. A flutter of panic rose in her chest. Had Roman taken her mother somewhere? Was this some kind of manipulation? She pulled out her phone to call Loretta when she noticed an envelope on the coffee table with her name written on it in Roman's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a letter and a key, not to the penthouse but an ordinary house key. "Zariah, your mother is with me. She's fine. You can call her to confirm. We've gone to the address below. Come when you're ready. Bring whatever you need from the penthouse. Stay or go. The choice will be yours, as it always should have been." Roman below was an address Zariah didn't recognize, in a neighborhood across town. Confused but curious, she called her mother, who answered on the second ring. "Mama, where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby girl," Loretta assured her. "Roman asked me to come with him this morning. He has something to show you, but he wanted my opinion first." "What is it?" Zariah asked suspiciously. "That's for him to explain," Loretta said firmly. "Just come to the address he left you, and Zariah, come with an open heart." After hanging up, Zariah stood in the silent penthouse debating what to do. Part of her wanted to ignore the address, to pack her things and return to Kendra's, to make a clean break before she got in any deeper. But another part, the part that remembered the tenderness in Roman's touch, the vulnerability in his eyes when he spoke of his childhood, the way he'd held her like she was precious, that part wanted to give him one last chance to prove that what they had was real. With a deep breath, she grabbed her purse and headed back to the elevator. Whatever Roman had planned, she would face it head on, and then she would decide, once and for all, whether there was a future for them together. The address led her to a modest neighborhood, not fancy but not run down either. working class with small houses and well-kept yards, the kind of neighborhood she'd grown up in, where people knew their neighbors and looked out for each other. The house at the end of the street was a simple two-story with blue shutters and a wraparound porch. Nothing like the luxury high-rise where Roman lived, nothing like what she would have expected from a billionaire CEO. Zoraya parked her car, another gift from Roman that she'd nearly left behind that morning, and approached the front door hesitantly. Before she could use the key he'd provided, the door opened, revealing her mother's smiling face. "Come in, baby girl," Loretta said, pulling her into a hug. "He's in the backyard." Zoraya followed her mother through the house, noting the simple, comfortable furnishings, a far cry from the sleek designer pieces in the penthouse. There were fresh flowers on the dining table, family photos on the walls, a worn but clean sofa in the living room. It felt like a home, not a showpiece. "What is this place?" she asked, confused. "See for yourself," Loretta replied, leading her to the back door. The backyard was small but perfect, a patch of green grass, flower beds around the edges, a massive oak tree providing shade for a wooden bench swing. And there, sitting on the swing with his back to her, was Roman. He must have heard the door open because he stood and turned, his expression a mixture of hope and fear that she'd never seen on his face before. He looked different, dressed in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, his hair unstyled, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he'd slept as little as she had. "You came," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "My mother's here," Zoraya pointed out. "Did I have a choice?" "You always have a choice," Roman replied. "That's what I'm trying to show you. By bringing me to—" she gestured around them. "Wherever this is. My home," he said simply. "My real home." Zoraya stared at him in confusion. "What are you talking about? You live in the penthouse." Roman shook his head. "I own the penthouse. I stay there because it's what people expect from someone in my position. But this," he gestured to the house behind them, "this is where I live, where I come when I need to remember who I really am." He held out his hand to her. "Let me show you." After a moment's hesitation, Zoraya took his hand, allowing him to lead her back inside. He guided her through the house, room by room, telling her the story of each space. "I bought this house 5 years ago," he explained as they entered a small home office filled with books. "After I made my first million, everyone expected me to move into a penthouse, to get the sports car, to live the lifestyle. And I did that, on the surface. But I needed a place that was just mine, a place without pretense." "Why?" Zoraya asked, genuinely curious. "Because I grew up in a house like this," Roman admitted. "Before my mother left, before my father became obsessed with wealth and status. We were happy here in a house just like this one, and I promised myself that when I had a family of my own, it would be in a real home, not a showpiece." Zoraya's heart skipped at the word family, but she kept her expression neutral. "Why didn't you ever mention this place before?" "Because I've never shown it to anyone," Roman said quietly. "Not Victoria, not my business associates, no one except my housekeeper, and now you and your mother." The significance of that admission wasn't lost on Zoraya. "Why now?" "Because I need you to see the real me," Roman said, his voice breaking slightly. "Not the CEO, not the billionaire, not the man who once thought he could buy a night with you. Just me. The man who grew up wanting nothing more than a real home and a family who loved him for himself, not what he could provide." He led her upstairs to a bedroom decorated in soft yellows and greens. A crib stood in one corner, a rocking chair beside it. Stuffed animals lined a shelf, and a mobile of stars and moons hung from the ceiling. "I started working on this room the day after you told me you were pregnant," Roman said softly. "Not because I expected you to live here, not because I thought I could buy your affection with a nursery, but because for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to hope for something I've never had, a real family." Tears filled Zoraya's eyes as she took in the room, the obvious care that had gone into preparing it. "Roman, please let me finish," he interrupted gently. "What Victoria showed you last night, that confidentiality agreement, it was real. I had it drawn up before I knew you, when I was still the kind of man who thought everything and everyone had a price. I'm not proud of that man. I'm ashamed of him. But Zoraya, that's not who I am anymore. That's not who you made me." He took her hands in his eyes never leaving hers. "You've changed me. You made me feel again, hope again, dream again. You made me want to be better than I was, and I'm still learning, still trying to be worthy of what you've given me." "What have I given you?" Zoraya whispered. "A heart," Roman said simply. "You gave me back my heart, Zoraya, and now it belongs to you, if you want it." Zoraya's own heart pounded in her chest as she searched his face, looking for any sign of manipulation or calculation. All she found was raw vulnerability, a man laying his soul bare before her. "I don't care about the penthouse," she said finally. "I don't care about the money or the status or any of it. All I've ever wanted was to know that what's between us is real, that I'm not just another transaction to you. You are the only real thing in my life," Roman said, his voice thick with emotion. "You and our child. Everything else, the company, the wealth, the power, it's meaningless without you." He sank to his knees before her, looking up with eyes that held nothing back. "I love you, Zoraya Cole. Not because you're carrying my child, because you gave me a heart when I thought mine was dead. Because you saw past all my walls to the man I could be. Because you make me want to be worthy of the love you show to everyone around you." Tears streamed down Zoraya's face as the words she'd been longing to hear finally came. "Say it again," she whispered. "I love you," Roman repeated, his own eyes glistening. "I love your strength, your fire, your compassion. I love the way you fight for what matters. I love the mother you'll be to our child. I love everything about you, and I'm terrified of losing you because of who I was before I knew you." Zoraya sank down to kneel in front of him, cupping his face in her hands. "I love you too," she admitted, "despite how we began, despite everything. I've tried to fight it, tried to protect myself, but the truth is I fell in love with you somewhere between that night of conversation and now. With the man you're becoming, not the man you were." Roman pressed his forehead to hers, relief washing over his features. "Then stay," he whispered. "Stay with me, here in the penthouse, wherever you want. Just stay." "Here," Zoraya decided, looking around at the nursery. "I want our child to grow up in a real home, like this one." Roman smiled, a genuine, joyful smile that transformed his entire face. "Really? You'd give up the penthouse?" "In a heartbeat," Zoraya assured him. "I never belonged there anyway. But here? This feels right." She placed his hand on her belly, where their child was kicking vigorously. "Feels like someone else agrees." Roman's eyes widened at the sensation of his child moving beneath his hand. "That's amazing," he breathed. Then, with sudden urgency, "Marry me." Zoraya blinked in surprise. "What? Marry me?" Roman repeated, more sure this time. "Not because of the baby, not because it's the proper thing to do, but because I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Zoraya searched his face, finding nothing but sincerity in his gaze. "Are you sure? Your world—" "You are my world," he interrupted firmly. "The rest is just scenery. I don't care what anyone thinks. I don't care about business expectations or social standing. I care about waking up next to you every day, about raising our child together, about building the kind of family I've always wanted, but never thought I deserved." Zoraya's heart swelled with love and hope. The man kneeling before her wasn't the cold CEO who had once tried to buy her for a night. He was someone new, someone who had fought his way back to his true self through the love they'd found together. "Yes," she said, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes, I'll marry you." Roman pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And in that moment, in the nursery they would fill with love and laughter, Zoraya knew that their story, one that had begun with shame and desperation, had transformed into something beautiful, a story of redemption, of second chances, of a love strong enough to heal the wounds of the past and build a future neither of them had dared to dream possible. "She did what?" Victoria's screech echoed through her office, causing her assistant to wince. "According to my sources, Roman Vega and Zoraya Cole were married yesterday," Jeremy repeated, handing her the tablet with the marriage certificate displayed on screen. "Small ceremony, just family, and they've moved out of the penthouse into some house in the suburbs." Victoria stared at the document in disbelief. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. The cleaning girl was supposed to take the money and run. Roman was supposed to be devastated, vulnerable, ready to return to the business arrangement their relationship had always been meant to be. Instead, he'd married her, actually married her. "The merger?" she asked weakly. "Going forward without our participation," Jeremy confirmed. "Roman convinced the board that Apex Industries was an unstable partner. Our stock is down 12 points since the announcement." Victoria collapsed into her chair, the tablet slipping from her fingers. She'd played her hand and lost, not just the business opportunity, but any remaining hold she might have had over Roman Vega. "What now?" Jeremy asked cautiously. Victoria stared out the window at the city skyline, her empire suddenly feeling hollow. "Now," she said quietly, "we move on." As her assistant left, Victoria swiveled her chair to face the wall of achievements that had defined her life, the awards, the magazine covers, the symbols of her success. For the first time, she wondered if she'd been pursuing the wrong things all along, if perhaps Roman had found something worth more than all the wealth and power she'd ever accumulated. "Mrs. Vega, you can push now." Zariah gripped Roman's hand with crushing force as another contraction seized her. After 9 hours of labor, their child was finally ready to make an appearance. "You're doing amazing," Roman murmured, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. "You're the strongest person I've ever known." "Tell me that again when this is over," Zariah gasped, bearing down with all her might. Minutes that felt like hours passed in a blur of pain and determination, and then suddenly the room filled with the indignant cry of new life. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, placing the squirming red-faced infant on Zariah's chest. A healthy baby boy. Zariah stared down at their son in wonder, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Roman leaned down, one arm around Zariah's shoulders, the other gently touching his son's tiny hand. "He's perfect," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Just like his mother." As the baby's cries subsided into hiccuping whimpers, his tiny fingers wrapped around Roman's thumb with surprising strength. Roman looked from his son to Zariah, overwhelmed by the love filling his heart. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" Zariah asked, her eyes never leaving their child's face. "For giving me everything I never knew I needed," Roman said simply. "A family, a home, a reason to be better than I was." Zariah smiled up at him, exhausted but radiant. "We gave it to each other." Later, as darkness fell over the city, Roman stood by the window of Zariah's hospital room, their son cradled in his arms. The baby was sleeping peacefully, tiny features relaxed in complete trust and contentment. "What are you thinking about?" Zariah asked softly from the bed. Roman turned to her, the love in his eyes unmistakable. "About how close I came to losing all of this, how one night changed everything." "It wasn't just one night," Zariah pointed out. "It was every choice we made after, every time we chose trust over fear, honesty over pride. Every time you pushed me to be better than I thought I could be," Roman added, carrying their son back to her. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, creating a circle of 3. "I used to think love was a liability, something that made you weak. And now," Zariah prompted, reaching out to stroke their baby's downy head. Roman looked at his wife and son, at the family he'd never dared hope for. "Now I know it's the only real strength there is." Zariah rested her head against his shoulder, content in a way she'd never imagined possible when she was scrubbing floors at Monarch Holdings, drowning in debt and despair. "What should we name him?" she asked. Roman considered for a moment. "James," he suggested, "after your father, the man who taught you the meaning of real family." Tears filled Zariah's eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "James Roman Vega," she said, trying it out. "Strong name for a strong boy, with the strongest mother in the world," Roman added, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Outside the hospital window, the city continued its busy pace, unaware of the miracle taking place in that quiet room. The world of business deals and power plays seemed a million miles away from the simple, profound joy of a family finding its way together. In the end, it wasn't about debts paid or arrangements made. It wasn't about wealth or status or where they lived. It was about two people who found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something beautiful from a beginning that should have broken them. Something that would last long after the memory of how they began had faded. A love born from the ashes of obligation, stronger for the fire it had endured. As night deepened, Zariah watched her husband rock their newborn son to sleep, his face filled with a peace she'd never seen before. Standing in the doorway, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would be many, they would face them together. Not as a debt to be paid or an arrangement to be honored, but as a family, bound by the strongest tie of all, a love freely given with no strings attached. A love that had healed them both, and in doing so, created something neither of them could have imagined on that night that now seemed a lifetime ago. A future, a home, a beginning, the end.